I love my old rim brake bike. I rode it for years, it's really fast and really comfortable, but compared to modern disc brakes, the stopping power, especially in the wet with my fully carbon wheels, yeah, it's pretty dreadful. So let's upgrade it to disc brake. My name, as always, is Luke. I think I'm gonna grow out my beard, hence the stubble. And welcome back to Trace Fellow. Right, this is something I've always wanted to try. I've got my rim brake bike here. I've had it since 2016, love this thing, but because it's not disc brake, every time I look at it, I'm absolutely filled with disgust. It makes me sick. No, but in all seriousness, I've always wanted to try it. So just converting the front end. So I'll need a new fork, a new wheel, a new disc rotor, and a brake caliper. It'll be much better. In the wet on road bikes, around 70–80% of the braking is done on the front wheel anyway. And if I go with mechanical disc, I won't even need to change the group set. Although I do have a fully hydraulic disc brake group set, just hanging around, so might put that on later, might not. Wink. Anyway, let's go.
Okay, so the biggest hurdle is going to be choosing the right fork. So the fork on my rim brake bike, it has quite a unique shape, especially at the top here, near the brake caliper. But as it happens, the fork on this disc brake bike frame that I bought a few months ago, it does look very similar. So let's pull it off and give it a go. So getting the fork off this bike is incredibly easy. It's already fitted with a mechanical disc brake caliper, which is going to make my life a little bit easier. So loosen the cable, take off the top cap, undo the stem clamp, and pull the fork out. Easy peasy. So let's do the same on the rim brake bike. Undo the brake cable, loosen the top cap, and pull off the fork.
Okay, cool. So both forks are off of the bikes. That was nice and straightforward. So let's see if this disc brake fork here will fit inside this rim brake frame.
So the headset bearings are the first thing to check. If one fork used a slightly smaller lower bearing, yeah, we'd be in trouble. But as it happens, they're both identical. Standardization tends to make manufacturing and sourcing parts much cheaper. So with these budget carbon frames, I found the headset bearings, yeah, they all tend to be the same size. Usually angular contact bearings, 52mm on the lower and 42mm for the upper. But obviously, this isn't always the case. Some of the newer generation fully internally routed frames use different bearings, so this will need checking. Now, the original rim brake fork, it's got an integrated crown race molded into the carbon. Hopefully you can see that here. The disc brake fork, on the other hand, although it uses the exact same bearings, it does require this separate crown race on the bottom of the steerer tube here. But with all that confirmed, it should fit fine. So yeah, let's get it on. Exactly the same process as before, just in reverse. Slide the fork in with the bearings, get the headset assembled, stem clamped on, and the headset cap tightened up. Easy peasy.
Right then, look at that. It looks great. So I did have to remove one spacer from the top here. So I was running two 1 centimeter spacers underneath the stem, but because this steerer tube was cut a little bit shorter, I did have to remove one of them, but that's not a big deal. But yeah, have a look at this. There's virtually no gap here. There's no rubbing at all. And this part of the fork is a very similar shape and curvature to the one that I've just taken off. Maybe they use a very similar mold, I'm not entirely sure, but either way, it almost looks OEM. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with that. Now I think the wheelbase might be about ½ centimeter longer, because this gap, although it's very similar, I think it is slightly larger. So I think it's a slightly longer wheelbase, but I'll measure it and check it out. But overall, really happy with it. So next up, let's get the brake cabled in. Okay, so the old wheelbase was 105, 106. So this is about 108, 109, something like that. So a couple millimeters longer. So shouldn't affect handling that much, but I'll have to get it out on the road and see.
Right then, cabling the new mechanical brake. Remove the bar tape, size up the new cable housing, cut it to length, feed it through the bars and frame, and get a new cable installed. Pretty simple stuff.
Right, so there we go, all finished. And I'm really chuffed with how it's come out. A very simple project, actually, about an hour and a half. Start to finish to get this all done. And I think unless you were really looking for it, you probably wouldn't even notice that it was disc on the front and rim on the back. It's not immediately apparent anyway. So yeah, the cable routing at the front is nice and tidy, and I've used the Jaguar KEB-SL compressionless housing, which tends to improve the feel of mechanical disc in my experience. So I've got the Juentech GT calipers on the front there. If I pull the brake for you, like so, you'll be able to see it's all cabled in properly. Brakes feel nice, and in fact, the lever pull for the rear brake and the front brake is quite similar. So this is the rear brake for me, comes back to about there, and this is the front brake, comes back to roughly the same point actually. So I don't think that the feel and balance of the bike is going to be affected that much, because as I showed you, the wheelbase is only a couple of millimeters longer than the original setup. So I'm desperate to get this kind of odd Frankenbike out on the road.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Right, so Siroko, little Spanish outfit, yeah, they're back to sponsor another episode. They make some great value cycle gear that I've been wearing on every single ride for the last 3 years. This M2 jersey is 42 quid, looks fantastic, and uses some really nice quality fabrics. The pockets at the back are super deep to carry all your stuff, and the rear panel is made of this lighter grade mesh fabric for added breathability. Their bib shorts are also fantastic. I wear these Aspen bib shorts all the time. Again, they're 42 quid, super comfortable, and the padding is really, really nice, which is great because some of my saddles are quite unforgiving. If the weather looks a bit changeable, you might want to consider their arm warmers, leg warmers, neck scarf maybe, or if it looks like rain, one of their cycle vests or gilets. They're really lightweight and keep all the wind and the rain off, but if you don't need it, it packs up super small so you can just carry it with you. But Siroko do all sorts of cycle gear for basically every eventuality. It's great value and looks really slick, so yeah, I genuinely really like it. So use my link in the description for 10% off the entire site. Anyway, definitely check them out, but with that aside, let's get back to it.
So yeah, all in all, it rode really nicely actually. I will say the disc rotor that was originally on the front wheel, yeah, it was pretty dreadful. It juddered a lot under heavy braking and squealed so much in the wet.
Dreadful.
So to remedy the braking, I took out the pads. They looked alright, but I gave them a clean anyway with a little bit of sanding and some isopropyl alcohol, and then slapped on a new disc rotor. Anyway, once that was sorted, I took the bike down some pretty savage descents near me to give it a really good shakedown. I rode it pretty aggressively, and yeah, I was happy. Bit of an upgrade from rim brakes on fully carbon rims, if you ask me, so definitely a success in my opinion.
So ultimately, on the face of it, this is quite a silly project really, but equally, I know there are loads of you out there that have got some really nice rim brake bikes that maybe you don't use anymore, and this is quite a fun little weekend project to maybe breathe a bit of new life into them. Like I mentioned, the wheelbase was only elongated by like 2 or 3 millimeters, so the handling is pretty much identical to what it was, and if you got all the parts secondhand, you could do this for really cheap as well. Now, mechanical disc brake, admittedly, doesn't have the best reputation. I think it's fine, to be honest. I rode mechanical disc exclusively whilst I lived in Cornwall for 18 months, and the hills around there are no joke, let me tell you. But as it happens, I do have a spare hydraulic shifter here and also a spare caliper. So let's stick these on instead.
Take the wheel off, the caliper off, the shifter off. Frantically search for the correct brake adapter plate. Attach the new caliper, new shifter on. Plumb in the new brake line, secure the shifter, route the gear cable, bleed the hydraulic brakes, and attach the new bar tape.
So yeah, here we are. I think possibly the ultimate Frankenstein build. Not only is it hydraulic disc brake at the front and rim brake on the back, the whole thing is just a complete mishmash of parts. So we've got a Team Pro shifter from Sensar controlling the shifting and the braking At the rear, we've got a Shimano 105 cassette. The rear derailleur is Shimano Ultegra. The rear brake caliper is a knockoff carbon Lecky 8 caliper from AliExpress. And then the left-hand shifter, the front brake and the front derailleur are from an L-TWOO RX group set. So yeah, complete mishmash of parts, but it all works together surprisingly well. Firstly, I think it does look pretty good, actually. I mean, at a swift enough glance, it certainly doesn't look like a bike assembled from the equivalent of an AliExpress lost property bin. Now, the neon bar tape here, I might swap that out for plain black, but it needed replacing, and that's what I had in the cupboard, so it went on. But yeah, all in all, I reckon it looks pretty tasty, actually. If you were sat in a coffee shop and saw it riding past, like I said earlier, it does almost look OEM. And yeah, it rides really, really nicely. I do love this frame. The wheelbase is pretty much identical, and with the additional stopping power at the front offered by this fully hydraulic disc brake, yeah, overall handling is pretty great. This thing rides so much better than it has any right to, honestly. It's really, really wicked. Changing gear obviously requires slightly different hand movements on the left and the right, but you get used to it so quickly. Like when you're out on the bike riding around, you build up that muscle memory very, very quickly, and that's not a problem. Plus, the shifters are quite a similar width and a similar shape overall, actually. So when you're holding on to the hoods, the bike doesn't feel lopsided either. So yeah, the final product here is far, far better than I thought it would be going into this. It just feels really solid when you're out riding it. I can definitely see myself using this as my kind of go-to autumn-winter training bike. Most of the parts on here are quite old, so I'm not worried about keeping them pristine. Plus, with hydraulic disc brake on the front, stopping in the wet is not going to be a problem. Now, let's say you wanted to replicate this approach and put disc brake on the front of your rim brake bike. Choosing the right wheel, disc rotor, mechanical disc brake caliper, or half a hydraulic group set, that's not going to be a problem. That stuff is going to be cheap and readily available on the second-hand market. The main issue is going to be sourcing the right fork. It just so happens that this fork came from a Carbon Aero road bike frame with a very similar geometry, and the headset bearings were the same size. It was just disc brake, so it was quite an easy swap in. Now, I did have another disc brake fork hanging around the workshop, so I tried that as well, and it had the same bearing sizes again, so it did fit on the frame and nothing rubbed. And even with the wheel attached, everything cleared, and it definitely would have worked, but it was from a more endurance style road bike, so yeah, it did look a little bit goofy. So yeah, choosing the right fork, easily the biggest hurdle for a project like this. I don't think it'd be that difficult, but then maybe I just got lucky. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this weird little experiment that I've done here. Let me know in the comments if you would ever do anything like this to a bike that you owned, or equally, let me know if I've desecrated the sanctity and piety of this beautiful rim brake machine. Anyway, subscribe, hit the like button, and if you've got any spare baguette emojis lying around, sling them my way as well. Right, that's it. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.
It's the bonus clip time.
Okay, so let's do a final weigh-in. Now we've got disc on the front. So before, when it was fully rim brake, it was about 7.4 kilos on the nose with this thing. So yeah, we've got the same pedals, crank, bottle cage, etc. So let's weigh it up now. So that's zeroed out. Let's grab that, put that on there like so. And she is swinging. And what are we looking at? 7.595. So we've put on about 200 grams, which isn't too bad. Most of that is going to be in the caliper and the fork. These disc brake forks tend to be a little bit chunkier to cope with the additional strain of braking down there. But all in all, another 200 grams, not too bad. Okay, so I'm literally just finishing up the edit for this episode, but I wanted to say thank you to all of you lot. So at the end of the last video I uploaded, I put a little bit in to say that I'm going to be having a little baby girl, actually, and she is due any day now, which is incredibly exciting. She could literally rock up today. And I just wanted to say thank you for all the really lovely, kind comments that I received. Like, the little Trace Fellow community absolutely blows me away at every step. Because, I mean, to be frank, there are aspects of becoming a new parent that are quite scary. Obviously, I'm absolutely over the moon and super excited to meet this little person. But things like this, like being able to just sink hours and hours into my like Trace Fellow stuff, I know that's going to be a massive luxury. But there were just so many like super positive and supportive comments from parents being like, it's an absolutely incredible journey. And there were even some of you that said stuff like they miss the super early days of having a kid that I'm literally just about to step into. So it was just really, really reassuring to like hear that from parents, from you lot out there. So yeah, genuinely, thank you so much. Right, anyway, enough gushing from me. Hope you liked this episode that I've thrown together, and I'll see you next time, maybe with a little baby. Ooh. Right, anyway, see you next time. Ciao, ciao.